The truth about motivation is that it's a myth we've been sold since childhood, a comforting illusion that keeps most of us waiting for a perfect moment that never comes. Mel Robbins often says that the biggest mistake people make is believing they need to feel motivated to take action. But life doesn't reward those who wait, it rewards those who move. The women who truly transform their lives, the rare 5%, understand that feelings follow actions, not the other way around. They don't wait for clarity, courage, or confidence. They take one small step forward, and those feelings arrive later. When you act before you feel ready, something powerful happens inside you. You start to override the old patterns of hesitation and doubt that have kept you stuck for years. You begin to build a new identity, one based on action and self-trust rather than fear and overthinking. Mel Robbins calls it the 5-second rule, an incredibly simple but deeply powerful tool that can change everything. The rule is this: when you have an instinct to act on a goal or a commitment, you must move within 5 seconds before your mind kills the idea. Count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and move. That countdown breaks the habit of hesitation, and the act of moving interrupts the cycle of fear. It's like pushing yourself off a mental cliff and learning that you can fly. Most women wait for motivation because they think they need to feel confident or inspired first. What Mel teaches is that feelings are unreliable. You will never feel like going to the gym after a long day, speaking up in a meeting, or starting that side business that's been in your heart for years. The truth is, you'll feel scared, lazy, or uncertain most of the time. And that's normal. What separates the 5% from everyone else is that they act anyway. They recognize that hesitation is the kiss of death. The moment you pause, your brain starts generating excuses. You're too tired. It's not the right time, maybe tomorrow. Those thoughts sound reasonable, but they are poison disguised as logic. Acting before your mind interferes is how you take control of your life again. The more you do it, the easier it becomes, because every small act of courage strengthens the mental muscle of discipline. Motivation fades, but discipline grows stronger with each repetition. Imagine waking up each morning, and instead of scrolling through your phone, you count down from 5 and get up immediately. It seems small, but that one decision changes your entire day. It tells your brain, I'm in control, not my feelings. Over time, that single habit rewires your self-image. You stop identifying as someone who procrastinates and start seeing yourself as someone who takes action. The women who live by this rule don't have more time or fewer fears than anyone else. They've just learned how to bypass the emotional resistance that paralyzes others. They understand that life rewards movement. Every time you take action, you gain feedback, clarity, and momentum. Sitting and thinking about what to do next gives you nothing but anxiety. But doing, even imperfectly, gives you confidence and progress. Mel Robbins says that when you act without waiting for motivation, you're not just changing your behavior, you're changing your brain. You're building new neural pathways that associate movement with growth instead of fear. Many women struggle with overthinking, wanting to make the right choice before acting. But the truth is, no decision reveals itself fully until you take that first step. The 5% of women who succeed don't waste energy trying to plan every detail. They start small, test, learn, and adjust. They take imperfect action because they know that waiting for perfect conditions means waiting forever. They trust that clarity comes from doing, not from thinking. When Mel first introduced the 5-second rule to millions, she wasn't talking about massive life overhauls. She was talking about micro moments, those tiny windows where you decide whether to move forward or to retreat into comfort. It's in those seconds that your destiny is decided. Do you speak up in the meeting? Do you make that phone call? Do you write the first paragraph of the book? Every small act of courage compounds into an extraordinary life. When you act before you feel ready, you start to see how much time you've lost waiting for the right moment. Motivation, as Mel says, is garbage. It's never going to be there when you need it most. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings are fleeting. You can't build a meaningful life based on something that comes and goes. But you can build it on habits, on systems, and on the discipline of doing what you said you would do. That's what the 5% do differently. They use tools like the 5-second rule to push through resistance, not because they're fearless, but because they understand that fear will always be there. They just stop giving it power. Every time you act in the face of fear, the voice of self-doubt grows quieter. Eventually, you realize that you've become the kind of woman who doesn't wait for life to happen. She makes it happen. There's something freeing about realizing you don't have to feel ready. You can start before you know everything, before you feel confident, before you even believe in yourself. Action is the bridge between who you are and who you want to be. The first few steps might be uncomfortable, but that's where growth begins. The women who belong to that 5% club are not superhuman. They're ordinary women who have learned to do extraordinary things simply by mastering one principle: don't wait, act. They stop negotiating with their fears, they stop analyzing every outcome, and they start living in motion. That motion creates evidence of progress, and progress becomes the most powerful motivator of all. The more you move, the more your belief in yourself expands. When Mel Robbins talks about action, she's not talking about hustle or burnout. She's talking about alignment, about doing the small, meaningful things that align with your values and your goals. Taking action is not about doing more, it's about doing what matters most without delay. Whether it's sending that email, starting that project, or simply speaking your truth, each act of courage sends a message to your subconscious mind that you are capable, that you can trust yourself, that you are building a life based on intention, not impulse. Once you experience the power of taking action without waiting for motivation, you'll never want to go back to living passively. You'll understand that movement itself creates energy, that starting is often the hardest part, but always the most transformative. That's why Mel Robbins' rule resonates with millions, because it gives you back your power in 5 simple seconds. Every dream, every goal, every transformation begins the same way, with a decision followed by action. Waiting will only keep you where you are, but acting will take you somewhere new. The 5% of women who change their lives don't have secret resources or special talents. They've just learned that the gap between where they are and where they want to be can only be crossed through motion. Once you take that first leap, everything begins to shift. Doors open, opportunities appear, your confidence grows. You stop asking, "When will I feel ready?" and start saying, "I'm doing it anyway." That's where the magic begins, in those moments when you override your excuses, count down, and take control. Inside every woman lives a voice that never seems to stop talking, a voice that criticizes, compares, and questions every move. It's the voice that whispers, "You're not good enough. You're too late. You're not ready. They're better than you." Mel Robbins calls this voice the inner critic, and she believes it's the #1 barrier keeping women from living their full potential. The 5% of women who live with confidence and peace are not the ones who never hear that voice. They are the ones who have learned to silence it and act in spite of it. They understand that their thoughts are not facts, that their mind has been conditioned by years of comparison, fear, and external judgment. They don't believe everything they think. Instead, they learn to question it, redirect it, and replace it with self, compassion, and courage. The inner critic thrives on repetition, and for most women, it has been echoing the same lies for decades. You're not smart enough to start that business. You're too old to change careers. You're not beautiful enough to be seen. You're not strong enough to walk away. These are not truths. They're learned beliefs. And like all learned things, they can be unlearned. Mel Robbins explains that silencing your inner critic starts with awareness. You can't change what you don't notice. Most women don't even realize how much mental energy they spend criticizing themselves because it's become background noise. The 5% of women who rise above it begin by noticing their thoughts. They start to catch the moments when they call themselves names or mentally replay a mistake. They pause and ask, would I say this to someone I love? That single question breaks the automatic cycle of self-attack. Awareness creates a gap between you and the voice in your head, and in that gap lies your power to choose a new thought. The moment you realize that you are not your thoughts, you gain freedom. You can observe the inner critic without obeying it. That's the shift Mel teaches, moving from self-judgment to self-command. Silencing your inner critic doesn't mean pretending everything is fine or ignoring your flaws. It means speaking to yourself with the same respect and kindness you give others. The women who follow this rule have learned that self-compassion isn't weakness, it's strength. They understand that the way you talk to yourself shapes how you show up in the world. When you constantly tell yourself you're not enough, you subconsciously limit what you attempt. You shrink to fit your doubts. But when you speak to yourself with encouragement, you expand. You take risks, you show up, you try again. Mel Robbins says your brain believes whatever you tell it most often. If you repeat criticism, it accepts that as your identity. But if you start replacing that voice with affirmations of truth and power, your brain rewires itself. Neuroscience proves that thought patterns can change through repetition. So when you start saying, I can do this, I am learning, I am worthy, you're not just being positive, you're reshaping your mental reality. Many women grow up in environments where self-criticism is disguised as humility. They are taught not to take up too much space, not to be too loud, not to believe too much in themselves. Over time, those messages become the inner critic's language. The 5% of women who break free from it recognize that humility doesn't mean shrinking. It means staying grounded while still owning your worth. They stop apologizing for who they are. They start recognizing their value, not through others' validation, but through their own acknowledgement. Every time they catch the critic and respond with compassion, they reclaim a piece of their confidence. Silencing that voice isn't about winning an argument with yourself. It's about changing the relationship you have with your mind. Mel Robbins often shares that your thoughts will always come, but you don't have to listen to every one of them. She suggests treating your thoughts like suggestions from a stranger, not commands from a master. Just because a thought appears doesn't mean it deserves your attention. The women who thrive choose which thoughts to engage with. When the inner critic says, you're going to fail, they respond, maybe, but I'll learn something valuable. When it says, you're not ready, they reply, I'll start small and figure it out. This is how mental strength is built, not by eliminating fear or doubt, but by answering it with action and compassion. You retrain your brain to see challenges as growth instead of danger. Your inner critic also feeds on comparison. In today's world of social media and constant exposure, it's easy to feel like you're behind. The 5% know how to protect their focus. They understand that comparison is a thief that steals both joy and time. They remind themselves that everyone is on their own path and that someone else's success is not a reflection of their failure. Instead of using others as a reason to feel less, they use them as proof of what's possible. They turn envy into inspiration. When your inner critic says, "Look at her, she's doing so much better," you can say, "If she can do it, I can too." That single shift transforms jealousy into empowerment. Silencing the inner critic also requires changing your environment. Mel Robbins teaches that you can't expect to grow in a space that constantly reminds you of your limits. The women who rise choose to surround themselves with people who lift them higher, not those who amplify their doubts. They listen to voices of encouragement, mentors, authors, communities that remind them of their potential. They curate their mental input, understanding that whatever you consume mentally becomes the fuel for your self-talk. Positive input leads to empowering output. Another powerful practice Mel suggests is using physical movement to interrupt negative thought loops. When your mind starts spiraling with self-criticism, changing your physical state, standing up, walking, taking a breath can reset your brain's focus. The 5-second rule can also apply here. When you notice yourself sinking into self-doubt, count backward from 5 and replace the thought with a supportive one. It could be as simple as "I'm trying, and that's enough." Over time, your brain begins to automatically reach for kinder thoughts instead of critical ones. Women often believe that being hard on themselves is the only way to stay disciplined or improve. But the truth is, shame doesn't create growth, it creates paralysis. Self-compassion, on the other hand, fuels resilience. The women who silence their critics still hold themselves accountable, but they do it with grace. They don't say, "I failed, I'm worthless." They say, "I made a mistake, I'll learn and try again." That subtle difference determines whether you spiral or evolve. Mel Robbins emphasizes that confidence doesn't come from perfection. It comes from keeping promises to yourself. Every time you choose to speak kindly instead of cruelly, you build integrity with yourself, and that integrity turns into unshakable confidence. Silencing your inner critic is not a one-time act, it's a lifelong practice. The voice might never disappear completely, but it loses its power when you stop believing it. The 5% of women who master this know how to separate truth from narrative. They don't let past experiences define their future possibilities. They recognize that every negative thought is an opportunity to rewrite their story. Instead of letting fear or guilt control them, they use those emotions as cues to practice more compassion, more awareness, and more courage. Every time they rise above the critic's voice, they strengthen their inner leader, they build a mind that works for them, not against them, and that mental freedom becomes the foundation for everything else they create. Every woman reaches a point where she realizes that her energy is her most valuable currency, and how she spends it determines the quality of her life. Mel Robbins often says that protecting your energy and setting boundaries isn't about being cold or distant. It's about respecting yourself enough to stop giving your time, attention, and emotions to things that drain you. The 5% of women who live with balance and peace understand that saying yes to everything is not kindness, it's self-abandonment. They've learned that burnout, resentment, and exhaustion don't make you noble, they make you disconnected from who you truly are. Protecting your energy means deciding what matters most and refusing to let guilt or obligation pull you away from it. It's not selfish, it's survival. From a young age, many women are taught to please, to care, to nurture, often at the expense of their own well-being. They're told that being good means being available, accommodating, and agreeable. Over time, that conditioning becomes a habit, a reflex to say yes, even when every part of you wants to say no. The women who break that cycle, the 5%, have learned that constantly putting others first leads to emotional bankruptcy. They understand that you cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot give your best self to the world if you're constantly running on empty. Protecting your energy begins with the courage to pause before committing and asking, does this align with my values, my goals, and my peace? If the answer is no, they choose themselves without apology. Mel Robbins teaches that boundaries are a form of self-respect. They are not walls, they are filters that protect what's sacred. Every time you set a boundary, you send a message to yourself and to others that your time and energy have value. But boundaries are not just about what you say no to, they're also about what you say yes to with intention. The 5% of women who live fully choose their yeses carefully. They don't chase approval or validation. They understand that saying no to others often means saying yes to themselves, to rest, to reflection, to creativity, to healing. That's why they don't explain or justify their boundaries. They know that people who are meant to be in their lives will respect them, and those who don't are simply revealing their own lack of boundaries. One of the hardest lessons Mel Robbins emphasizes is that not everyone deserves access to your energy. Some relationships are simply not meant to continue at full strength. The 5% of women who protect their energy are not afraid to distance themselves from negativity, drama, or manipulation. They recognize emotional vampires, the people who take and take but never give back, and they quietly step back without guilt. They stop trying to fix, to rescue, to convince. They understand that peace is more important than pleasing. Protecting your energy means being selective about who you allow into your inner circle. It's realizing that your mental health and emotional balance depend on who you spend your time with. Mel often shares that protecting your energy also means managing your environment. It's not just people who drain you. It's the habits, routines, and digital noise that clutter your mind. The 5% of women who thrive simplify their lives. They turn off unnecessary notifications, create quiet spaces, and prioritize stillness. They take time away from constant stimulation to reconnect with themselves. They understand that energy leaks happen in small, unnoticed ways, through gossip, overcommitment, multitasking, or constant comparison. Every time they choose solitude over chaos, presence over distraction, they recharge their inner power. Protecting your energy isn't about isolation, it's about restoration. There's a misconception that strong women never get tired, but the truth is, they just refuse to let exhaustion define them. They know when to step back. They honor their body's signals instead of ignoring them. Mel Robbins often reminds women that rest is not laziness, it's preparation for the next level. The 5% treat rest like a responsibility, not a reward. They schedule downtime with the same seriousness they schedule meetings. They understand that a woman who is rested, grounded, and centered is unstoppable. Protecting your energy means knowing your limits and respecting them because no one else will do it for you. Another part of this rule is emotional boundaries, understanding that you are not responsible for how others feel or react. Many women carry the burden of other people's emotions, feeling guilty for setting limits or saying no. The 5% of women who live with peace have learned to let go of that guilt. They realize that their only responsibility is to communicate their truth with kindness. How others choose to receive it is not their problem. This is one of the most freeing realizations a woman can have. It's the moment she stops carrying everyone else's weight and starts walking freely in her own truth. Mel Robbins often uses the phrase, protect your peace like it's your paycheck, because it truly is. The women who follow this rule understand that energy management is the foundation of success. You can't build a powerful life on exhaustion and resentment. They learn to say no early and often, They stop over-explaining their boundaries. They stop apologizing for needing space. When someone crosses a line, they address it calmly, but firmly. They don't wait until anger builds up. They understand that boundaries are not about controlling others. They're about controlling access to your time, emotions, and energy. Protecting your energy also means setting boundaries with yourself. The 5% of women who thrive know how to hold themselves accountable for the things that drain them. They stop indulging in negative self-talk, stop overthinking every decision, and stop trying to please everyone. They don't spend hours worrying about what people think of them. They remind themselves that not everyone will understand their choices, and that's okay. They prioritize peace over perfection. They give themselves permission to step back, to change their mind, to evolve without needing anyone's approval. Mel Robbins teaches that when you start protecting your energy, you'll notice how much resistance it triggers in others. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries won't like your new strength. They might call you distant, selfish, or cold. But the 5% of women who have found their peace know this truth: other people's discomfort is not your responsibility. Your growth will make some people uncomfortable, and that's how you know you're moving in the right direction. You can care for others without carrying them. You can love deeply without losing yourself. There's also an energetic shift that happens when you protect your energy. You start attracting people and opportunities that align with your vibration. When you're no longer drained, you operate from abundance instead of scarcity. You become more intuitive, more focused, more magnetic. You start making decisions from strength instead of exhaustion. You stop reacting and start responding. Protecting your energy opens space for creativity, clarity, and self-love to flourish. The women who live by this rule don't apologize for their boundaries because they know that their peace is not negotiable. They've learned that every yes has a cost, and they choose carefully what's worth their energy. They no longer feel the need to explain why they need rest, why they're unavailable, or why they're prioritizing themselves. They know that protecting their energy is not about shutting the world out. It's about creating the space to show up fully for what truly matters. Every time they choose peace over pressure, stillness over chaos, and self-respect over people-pleasing, they move one step closer to living life on their own terms. Perfection is one of the most seductive lies women are taught to chase. From a young age, society conditions women to believe that worthiness is tied to flawlessness, that you have to look perfect, perform perfectly, and live perfectly before you deserve happiness or success. Mel Robbins often says that perfectionism is just fear dressed up as productivity. It's the fear of judgment, the fear of failure, the fear of not being enough. The 5% of women who truly change their lives know that chasing perfection keeps you stuck, while chasing progress moves you forward. They've learned that it's better to take imperfect action than to wait for the perfect moment that never arrives. Progress, not perfection, is what builds confidence, momentum, and freedom. When you try to be perfect, you end up paralyzing yourself. You spend hours analyzing, planning, doubting, editing, and comparing until the spark of inspiration that started your idea fades away. You tell yourself that you'll start when you're ready, when you have more time, when you feel more confident. But readiness is an illusion. The women who belong to the 5% club understand that no one feels ready at the beginning. They take the first messy step, trusting that clarity will come through motion. Mel Robbins explains that action breeds clarity, not thinking. Every small move forward teaches you something valuable, even if it doesn't go as planned. Waiting for perfection means waiting forever, because perfection doesn't exist. It's a moving target that shifts with every new expectation. Progress, on the other hand, is measurable, achievable, and real. It's the satisfaction that comes from knowing you're better today than you were yesterday, even if only by one small step. The women who focus on progress don't waste time obsessing over how far they still have to go. They look back and see how far they've come. That perspective shift changes everything. Instead of feeling defeated by what's left undone, they feel empowered by what they've already achieved. Mel Robbins teaches that success is built on small wins compounded over time. You don't need to make massive leaps to change your life. You just need to keep moving, one imperfect action at a time. Perfectionism often disguises itself as high standards, but there's a difference between excellence and perfection. Excellence is doing your best with what you have. Perfection is never feeling like your best is enough. The 5% of women who thrive understand that striving for excellence fuels growth, while striving for perfection drains it. They've learned to celebrate effort, not just outcomes. They remind themselves that mistakes are not failures, they're feedback. Every setback teaches you something essential about yourself and your path. When you stop fearing mistakes, you start learning faster. You become adaptable. You stop judging yourself for not having it all figured out, and instead, you become proud of your resilience. Mel Robbins often reminds her audience that confidence doesn't come from knowing you'll succeed. It comes from surviving failure and realizing you're still standing. The women who embrace progress have stopped making mistakes means something about their worth. They understand that failure is part of the process, not proof that they're not enough. Every successful woman has a trail of imperfect attempts behind her. The difference is she didn't stop. The moment you shift your mindset from "I failed" to "I learned," you reclaim your power. You stop being a prisoner of perfection and start becoming the author of your growth. Another aspect of perfectionism is comparison. Women often look at others' highlight reels and assume that everyone else has it figured out. But comparison steals focus from your own journey. The 5% of women who focus on progress don't waste time trying to match someone else's timeline. They understand that growth is deeply personal. Mel Robbins says that when you compare yourself to others, you're measuring your behind the scenes against someone else's finished product. You can't win that game, and you don't need to play it. Your path is yours alone. When you commit to progress, the only person you compete with is the version of yourself from yesterday. That's where real growth happens, in quiet, consistent improvement, not in external validation. Women trapped in perfectionism often live in constant anxiety, always afraid of making a wrong move. But the women who rise have learned to take messy action. They start the business before they have all the answers. They post the video even if it's not polished. They apply for the job even if they don't meet every requirement. They speak up even if their voice shakes. And every time they do, they build the muscle of courage. Courage grows only through practice, not perfection. Mel Robbins teaches that action is the antidote to fear, and progress is the evidence that you're capable. Once you experience how good it feels to make progress, perfection loses its grip on you. The pursuit of perfection also kills creativity. When you're constantly editing yourself, you suffocate inspiration. The 5% of women who embrace progress allow themselves to experiment. They give themselves permission to be beginners. They know that the first version of anything, an idea, a plan, a skill, will rarely be great, but that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Progress requires patience and persistence. It means showing up even when you don't see immediate results. It means trusting that every effort compounds, even the invisible ones. Mel Robbins often says that consistency beats intensity every time. Doing a little bit every day is far more powerful than waiting to do everything perfectly someday. Perfectionists often crave control, but progress requires surrender. You have to let go of the illusion that everything can be planned and predicted. The women who grow the most are the ones who can adapt when things don't go their way. They find lessons in chaos. They turn setbacks into setups. They keep moving, adjusting, learning. Perfectionism makes you rigid. Progress makes you flexible. When you focus on progress, life becomes an adventure instead of a test. You stop trying to prove yourself and start discovering yourself. Mel Robbins emphasizes that perfectionism is often rooted in fear of judgment. Many women don't chase their dreams because they worry about what others will think if they fail. But the 5% who break free understand that people will judge you no matter what you do. You might as well be judged for being real, for trying, for growing. They choose authenticity over approval. They'd rather live an imperfect life that's true to them than a perfect life that's built to please others. That mindset shift creates freedom. Progress is not about how fast you go. It's about the direction you're headed. As long as you're moving forward, even slowly, you're winning. Women who live by progress over perfection also practice self-forgiveness. They don't punish themselves for slipping up or missing a goal. They reset and keep going. They understand that growth is not linear, it's messy, unpredictable, and full of restarts. Mel Robbins says that it's not about never falling, it's about getting back up faster each time. Every time you restart, you're stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. The 5% don't let one bad day become a bad week or one mistake become a reason to quit. They bounce back, adjust, and move forward again. Progress over perfection is also about trusting timing. Sometimes you're not late. You're just in a season of preparation. The 5% of women who follow this rule understand that not every seed blooms instantly. They keep planting, watering, and nurturing, knowing that results will come when they're meant to. They stay focused on the process, not the outcome. Perfectionists obsess over results. Progress-driven women fall in love with the journey. They understand that who they become in the process is far more important than what they achieve at the end. When you start living by progress, life feels lighter. You stop criticizing yourself for not being there yet and start appreciating the fact that you're still showing up. You stop chasing impossible standards and start celebrating real effort. Every small victory becomes fuel for the next step. You learn to find joy in the doing, not just in the outcome. The 5% of women who embrace this rule live with a sense of peace and momentum that perfectionists never experience. They don't wait for permission to begin. They begin, and through that beginning, they create the life they once thought they had to perfect. Believing you deserve more is one of the most powerful mental shifts a woman can make, and yet it's one of the hardest. Mel Robbins often says that the life you live will always match what you believe you deserve. And that's why so many women stay stuck in places that no longer serve them. They settle for less in relationships, in careers, and even in how they treat themselves. Not because they lack potential, but because deep down, they don't believe they're worthy of more. The 5% of women who truly transform their lives have learned that self-worth is not earned through perfection. Approval or external success, it's an internal decision. It's a declaration that says, I am enough, I am capable, I am allowed to want more. Once that belief takes root, everything begins to shift. Many women grow up being told to be grateful for what they have, to not ask for too much, to not make others uncomfortable with their ambition or desires. Gratitude is beautiful, but when it becomes a cage, it keeps you small. The women who belong to that 5% still practice gratitude, but they pair it with self-belief. They are grateful for what they have while still striving for what they deserve. They've learned that wanting more doesn't mean being ungrateful. It means honoring your potential. Believing you deserve more is not arrogance, it's self-respect. It's understanding that your dreams exist for a reason and that settling for less than you're capable of is a quiet form of self-abandonment. Mel Robbins teaches that everything in your life, your relationships, your income, your happiness, expands or contracts to the level of your self-worth. If you believe you only deserve a little, you'll unconsciously accept scraps, whether that's love, money, or opportunity. But the moment you raise your internal standard, the external world adjusts to match it. The 5% of women who live fully have learned to stop negotiating their worth. They stop chasing people who treat them like they're replaceable. They stop accepting jobs that drain them just because they're afraid of change. They stop silencing their voice to keep the peace. They stop giving energy to people who take and never give back. Believing you deserve more means refusing to live in environments where your value isn't seen or respected. Self-worth doesn't come from compliments or achievements. It comes from keeping promises to yourself. The more you follow through on what you say you'll do, the stronger your belief in yourself becomes. Mel Robbins often says confidence is built through action and self-worth is built through boundaries. The 5% of women who believe in themselves are not waiting for someone else to validate them. They've stopped outsourcing their value to others' opinions. Every time they keep a commitment to themselves, whether it's waking up earlier, saying no to a toxic situation, or pursuing a personal goal, they reinforce the message that they are someone worth showing up for. That's how belief is built. Not through words, but through consistent, aligned action. Believing you deserve more also means being willing to walk away from what doesn't honor you. It means letting go of people who love your potential, but not your boundaries. It means leaving behind comfort zones that feel safe, but stagnant. The women who thrive understand that not everyone can come with them to their next chapter. Some relationships and situations are meant for the version of you that didn't know her worth. As you grow, you will outgrow people, jobs, and environments that once felt familiar. That's not loss, it's evolution. Mel Robbins reminds women that the universe doesn't take things from you to punish you. It clears space for what aligns with who you're becoming. The 5% of women who live by this truth trust that walking away from less makes room for more. Another aspect of believing you deserve more is allowing yourself to receive. Many women are givers by nature. They give love, care, time, energy, but struggle to receive it in return. They deflect compliments, downplay their accomplishments, and reject help. But the women who rise know that receiving is not weakness. It's an acknowledgement that you are worthy of abundance, love, and support. Mel Robbins teaches that when you block yourself from receiving, you block the flow of abundance in your life. The 5% of women who believe they deserve more open themselves to receiving opportunities, kindness, and success without guilt. They understand that life expands when you stop rejecting what's meant for you. Self-worth also influences how you handle challenges. When you don't believe you deserve more, every setback feels like proof that you were never good enough to begin with. But when you have strong self-worth, you see obstacles as temporary. You don't question your value because of external outcomes. The 5% of women who live by this rule don't crumble under rejection. They learn from it. They don't internalize failure. They use it as feedback. Mel Robbins often reminds women that worth is not conditional. It doesn't disappear because you made a mistake or because someone didn't appreciate you. It's constant, unshakable, and self-generated. To believe you deserve more, you have to reprogram your subconscious mind. For years, many women have repeated limiting beliefs. I'm not enough. I can't do this. I don't have what it takes. Those thoughts become the blueprint for your behavior. Mel Robbins encourages women to interrupt that mental pattern by consciously choosing new beliefs. When you catch yourself saying something negative, you replace it with a statement that supports your growth. It may feel unnatural at first, but repetition creates rewiring. The 5% of women who embody worthiness make self-affirmation a daily habit. They tell themselves, I deserve happiness. I am capable of creating the life I want. I am enough as I am. Over time, those words become truth. Believing you deserve more doesn't mean your life becomes instantly easy. It means you stop tolerating what doesn't align with who you are becoming. You start demanding more from yourself and for yourself. You stop making excuses for people who mistreat you. You stop hiding your talents because you're afraid of shining too brightly. You stop settling for relationships where love feels conditional or inconsistent. The 5% of women who live by this rule understand that the standard you set is the standard others will meet. When you believe you deserve respect, you attract people who respect you. When you believe you deserve love, you attract healthier relationships. When you believe you deserve success, you start seeing opportunities where before you only saw limitations. Mel Robbins reminds women that belief is not built in silence, it's built in action. You prove your worth to yourself through the choices you make every day. Each time you set a boundary, pursue a dream, or choose peace over chaos, you reinforce your belief that you are worthy of something better. The women who belong to the 5% don't just hope for more, they expect it. They walk with the quiet confidence that what they seek is already seeking them. They no longer chase, beg, or convince. They attract, they align, and they allow. Believing you deserve more also means rewriting your story. Many women carry the weight of past pain, rejection, betrayal, disappointment, and let those experiences define their worth. But the 5% understand that your past doesn't determine your value. It's part of your story, not the whole of it. You can decide at any moment to stop identifying with what broke you and start identifying with what you're building. You can choose to view your struggles not as proof of weakness, but as evidence of strength. Every time you rise after being knocked down, you are proving that you deserve more than what hurt you. When you believe you deserve more, you stop settling for temporary comfort and start reaching for lasting fulfillment. You stop chasing things that look good on the outside but drain you on the inside. You become intentional about your energy, your choices, and your goals. You stop existing in survival mode and start creating a life that feels aligned with your true worth. Mel Robbins often says that belief is a decision you must renew daily. It's not something you wait to feel. It's something you practice until it becomes your truth. The women who live by this rule know that once you raise your standard and align your actions with that new belief, the world adjusts around you. You attract better opportunities, stronger relationships, and deeper peace because you've stopped accepting less than what you're meant for. There is an unspoken rule that goes beyond the first 5, one that separates those who simply dream from those who actually transform their lives, and that is to take radical responsibility for everything within your control. Mel Robbins often says that the moment you stop blaming, complaining, or waiting for someone else to fix your life is the exact moment you take your power back. Most people spend years giving away their energy to excuses, to resentment, to things they cannot change. But the women who belong to the 5% understand that ownership is liberation. They stop pointing fingers and start asking, what can I do right now to change this? They understand that no one is coming to rescue them. And that's not a tragedy, it's freedom. Because when you realize that your happiness, your peace, and your future are your responsibility, you become unstoppable. Taking responsibility doesn't mean taking the blame for everything that's ever gone wrong in your life. It means accepting that while you may not be responsible for what happened to you, you are responsible for how you respond. You can't control other people's choices, but you can control how you show up after they've made them. You can't change your past, but you can choose the story you tell yourself about it. The 5% of women who master this rule no longer waste energy wishing things were different. They focus on what they can do now. They take ownership of their growth, their emotions, and their reactions. Instead of saying, "I can't," they say, "How can I?" That single shift in mindset changes everything. Mel Robbins teaches that responsibility is the foundation of empowerment. The moment you stop waiting for external permission, you start creating your own momentum. The women who take radical responsibility stop blaming their childhood, their partner, their boss, or the system for every obstacle. They acknowledge those challenges, but they don't let them define the limits of what's possible. They understand that nobody is coming to push them, so they learn to push themselves. They stop outsourcing motivation and instead cultivate discipline. Responsibility isn't a burden, it's a superpower. It gives you control over your destiny because it turns every setback into a choice point. You either stay stuck in the story of what's wrong, or you decide to rewrite it. Many women struggle with this rule because it feels unfair. They think, why should I have to carry the weight when others have caused the damage? But Mel Robbins reminds women that waiting for fairness will keep you waiting forever. Life isn't about fairness, it's about power. And when you claim responsibility for your own peace and progress, you reclaim the power that others once held over you. The women who thrive don't need an apology to move forward. They don't need closure to heal. They create closure by choosing themselves. They understand that staying angry or hurt only prolongs the pain, while taking responsibility frees them from it. Every time they choose to respond with strength instead of resentment, they grow stronger. Taking responsibility also means being honest with yourself. It means looking at your habits, your thoughts, and your patterns without excuses. It's easy to say you want change, but harder to admit how your own behaviors might be keeping you stuck. The 5% of women who embody this rule aren't afraid of self-reflection. They confront their own procrastination, fear, and self-sabotage. They ask hard questions. Where am I holding myself back? What stories am I still telling that no longer serve me? Where am I blaming others instead of taking action? That kind of honesty can feel uncomfortable, but it's the birthplace of transformation. You can't change what you refuse to confront. Mel Robbins often says your life comes down to one thing: decisions. The quality of your decisions determines the quality of your life. And the women who take responsibility know that every decision counts. They don't wait for perfect conditions. They don't wait for someone to tell them it's their turn. They start where they are with what they have. They understand that small choices add up over time and that consistency matters more than intensity. Every morning, they make the decision to show up for themselves even when it's hard. That's what responsibility looks like. It's not loud or dramatic. It's quiet persistence. It's choosing discipline over distraction, progress over excuses, and courage over comfort. Another part of responsibility is emotional accountability. Many people let emotions control them, reacting to life instead of responding intentionally. But the women who belong to the 5% learn to manage their emotions rather than be managed by them. They take responsibility for their moods, their triggers, and their energy. Instead of saying, "She made me angry," they say, "I allowed myself to get angry." That shift isn't about denying feelings. It's about owning them. When you stop blaming others for how you feel, you take back emotional control. Mel Robbins encourages women to recognize that emotional maturity is not about suppressing emotions, but about expressing them responsibly. The more you master that skill, the more peace you create within yourself. Taking responsibility also extends to your dreams. Many women downplay their ambitions because they fear failure or judgment. They tell themselves that timing isn't right, that they don't have enough experience, that they'll start when things calm down. But Mel Robbins teaches that those are just excuses dressed as logic. The truth is, you're responsible for your dreams. No one will hand them to you. The women who make it happen are the ones who stop waiting and start working. They stop needing approval and start building. They don't need guarantees, just courage. Taking responsibility means understanding that success isn't about luck. It's about effort. You either make it happen or you make excuses. Responsibility also applies to your boundaries. If someone keeps crossing them, it's not just about their behavior, it's about your willingness to enforce them. The 5% of women who live by this rule understand that boundaries mean nothing if you don't back them up. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. Taking responsibility means recognizing when you've allowed disrespect or overextension and choosing differently next time. It's about realizing that protecting your peace is your job, not anyone else's. When you stop expecting others to read your mind or change for you, and instead take responsibility for your reactions and limits, you become unshakable. Mel Robbins emphasizes that personal responsibility creates freedom because it eliminates helplessness. The moment you decide that your happiness depends on you, not anyone else, you stop being a victim of circumstance. Life doesn't get easier, but you get stronger. You stop waiting for the right conditions and start creating them. You stop reacting to life and start designing it. The women who belong to the 5% live by that mindset every day. They don't need motivation. They have ownership. They don't need to be pushed. They are driven from within. Taking responsibility also means forgiving yourself. Growth is messy, and sometimes you'll fall short, make mistakes, or repeat patterns you thought you'd outgrown. But the women who live with power don't use those moments to shame themselves. They use them to learn. Responsibility isn't perfection. It's awareness and adjustment. It's saying, I messed up, but I can do better. It's giving yourself grace without giving up accountability. That balance is what keeps them moving forward when others quit. When you practice radical responsibility long enough, it becomes second nature. You stop wasting time on blame and drama. You stop waiting for motivation or permission. You stop needing external validation to feel capable. You realize that everything you need to change your life is already within you. The 5% of women who live this way have learned that the power to change doesn't come from the outside. It begins with ownership. They own their past, their pain, their choices, and their future. They know that while they can't control everything, they can always control how they respond, and that single truth gives them unshakable strength.